DonJay, welcome to the IDEA podcast. Really great having you on the show.
Hey, Darrin, thanks so much. I'm honored to be here. I love what you do.
Well, listen, it's honored for you to be here. And as we were talking beforehand, I mean, we've known each other a little bit before this interview, but I can't wait to learn more. So you are a financial coach, and you're the sole owner of the Drumbeat of Wealth. Tell me, when you were a young boy, was this the plan? What's the backstory?
Yeah, I had no, if you would have asked me this even in my 20s, I would have said, no, is that really a thing? So no, it was never on my radar.
All right. So when did you start learning about finances and money? And when did it become that switch for you saying, you know what, I'm going to pursue this as my vocation?
Yeah, I was probably 28, I want to say, when I became a financial advisor. Even then, I didn't understand psychology and money. That wasn't even a thing when I started as a
Yeah.
financial advisor. I was pre-internet. But starting into that world, I did that for about 27 years. And within about 3 years of starting as a financial advisor, I had lost three clients. Within a month they had passed away, and so it was all three of them were men, and the widows came in. And I thought at that point in time financial advice was all about numbers and graphs and those type of things. And so I processed the paperwork. Their accounts were up for the year. Showed them that. I thought everything was just wonderful. They had come to the meetings with their spouses before, so this wasn't new to them. And within 2 weeks, all three widows transferred their entire account out from me. And, um, and then I thought, well, they must go to the same church together or have worked together. Looked at all those things. There was only one common denominator, and I was staring at the one common denominator in the mirror. And so that really started me to start to think about, what do clients really want? And what they wanted was someone to be empathetic to them, to hold the emotions, to talk about the emotions openly. And that's when I really started down this path of financial psychology before it even had a name, and just continued on from there. Sold my practice here a few years ago and just felt like God was calling me to do something else, and went into financial coaching full time.
That's really cool. By the way, you mentioned pre-internet, and I think about this a lot. There's a whole new generation coming up now that will have no recollection of life before a smartphone and technology. And do you think about that? And how does that dynamic fit into the psychology of money?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think one of the things that, with the internet and with smartphones and with all these things, right, we're so connected, and that creates such a busy life. And I think the more busy we are, the less curious we are, the less we sit with our thoughts. And that's really what we need to do. We need to become curious about ourselves. We need that time of solitude, to sit with ourselves, to sit with our emotions. We have, what do they say, 60,000 thoughts a day, and 75% of those are estimated to be negative. How we did have more time like that. The movie Sandlot, is almost becoming like this nostalgia thing, right?
True.
And I remember as a teenager the phone being on the wall, right, rather than in our
I
pocket.
remember.
And yeah, and of course, whenever the phone rang, if you're a teenage boy or girl, you think it's a boy or girl calling you. And
Of course.
I remember coming in sometimes from being out with my dad, and the phone would be ringing, and I didn't get it in time, and he'd say, "Ah, it's okay, they'll call back." Thinking,
Uh-huh.
but wait a
That's right.
minute. So I think there's a lot of things where the world was slower back then, and it was a good thing, and we need to bring some of that back. We need to intentionally bring some of that back now.
Yeah, I like that. I like that philosophy a lot. Speaking of that the phone, et cetera. I saw a stat, Donjay, where the vast majority of single men, 18 to 24, have never asked a person out in person. In other words, they've never had that dynamic of approaching someone and asking someone out. And I say that because I can remember growing up, when you were going to be talking to a girl, the biggest fear was calling the home and the dad
Oh,
would
yeah.
pick up. I mean, that was the reason why you never called. I mean, if you called, you really have to be courageous. Can you relate?
Oh yes. Oh yes. So yeah. I had a few of those, I
Little,
think, where the dad answered and I hung up. So
well, same here. Same here. All right. Well, listen, you mentioned now you're a financial coach. I want to make sure I get this now. So you were a financial planner, but now you're doing financial coaching. Help me understand the difference between the two.
yeah. So financial planning, I would do financial coaching, but it was in the realm of also creating plans for retirement and in recommending actual investments, right? Which takes a Series 7 and 66 license. And so I really felt like I was being called to give that up and to go strictly into the coaching side, where coaching before was kind of a sideline and you couldn't give it enough attention. You didn't have enough hours in the day with the requirements for financial planning. And so financial coaching is dealing strictly in the emotions of money, addressing money memories, addressing money behaviors, and being able to spend a lot more time on that than I did as a financial advisor. Spending, excessive spending, anger around money, anxiety around money.
There's some really deep intrinsic motivators behind the way we behave. There's a depth and a purpose to what you are doing here. You're talking about everything from grief and fear and trauma. And walk me through that. What do we need to know about your philosophy and how it's a lot more than just a transaction?
When I think of financial or money story, I like to think of like a record. And fortunately for us, LPs and vinyls have come back in styles. And so when we think of a record, it's playing this beautiful music, this great song, and then all of a sudden there's a scratch and it gets caught. And so it plays a phrase and then it plays it again and then it plays it again. And the first couple of times we may not even recognize that it played that same phrase again. But then after a while, right, it becomes annoying. And so that's really our money story. It's floating along, and then we kind of get in a groove. And we might start by spending just a little bit and then a little bit more. And then it becomes like, whoa, this is really excessive, right? Or anxieties, all those type of things. And so that's financial coaching. And then I specialize in the grief and trauma side because what I've found is grief and trauma is a stressor. And so if we'll have a money story before a grief or trauma event, and then grief and trauma amplifies that. And what's
Interesting.
interesting is with any grief or trauma event, there was a lot of things going on, right? And we think about the people and the places, but in that grief or trauma event underneath it, money was speaking to you also. And it's and that's usually things that, say, a therapist won't address is what was money doing at that time? What did you learn about money? And because of the grief or trauma, it really roots itself deep.
I'm looking at your Instagram page right now, and there's a post, and it starts with "In my cancer journey, I found famous friends." You're no stranger to health scares and fear and trauma. Tell us about your cancer journey and how did that fit into your vocation, your purpose?
Yeah, good question. So I was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. I had about
Gosh,
20 tumors in both lungs, and then I had a tumor growing on my heart. And
DonJay, I didn't know any of that. Really? Oh
yeah,
my gosh.
yeah. So today I'm cancer free. That's a longer story for probably a podcast in and of itself.
I bet.
But I was encouraged by a coach at that time to really journal each day, no matter how hard it was, about what was good about the day, what was tough about the day. And that was it was so good. I learned a lot of things about myself. And so I did a post about famous friends. And that's just because I am I don't know whether you'd call me a music nerd, a music weirdo, whatever that might be. But I just love these songs that just rattle through my head. And so it's on the song, Famous Friends. That's a country song. And it's really not famous friends, but
Not
it's
yet.
those friends in our lives, right? That to us are famous. And so I think about during my cancer journey, I kept that pretty close, guarded, just because it was so hard to share, right? It was so hard to share, like,
Hmm.
hey, wow, I've got stage 4 and I know what that means. I know my odds. And so it was just tough to share. So I had a very small group. I was very organized in my cancer journey. And so I actually made a team. I had a notebook People who know me go, not surprised. So I had a can't lift me out of the chair team.
Really?
And so my next door neighbor, Bobby, who is pretty strong, said, I don't know what I can do for you, but I want to do something for you. And I said, well, how about when my wife cannot lift me out of the chair, she texts you and you come over and lift me? And he's like, I'm on it. And, and
Wow.
somebody just to do that, and never had to worry about my driveway being shoveled or plowed. Bobby was there at a moment's notice. And then I had two friends, Andy and Allison. Both their parents died of cancer. Andy's father died of lung cancer. And he was the first one to volunteer, like, I will drive you to every chemo appointment, pick you up, sit there with you, drive you home, get you settled. And I thought, for someone to re-enter their pain that much, like, that's a famous friend. And we need those in our lives. We need to be more aware of them in our lives. They're already there. We just need to be more aware and more grateful.
Right. Thanks for sharing that story. That reminds me, we both have a mutual friend, Bob Goff. And I remember talking to Bob once, and I was asking him why he is writing his books and why he's doing what he's doing. And what he said was, he has no desire to be famous with strangers. He wants to be famous to his family and to his friends. And I think about that a lot, about why we're doing what we're doing, for either affirmation or to be famous for some reason. And truly, we tend to miss the obvious. That I love what you have here about finding your famous friends. What do you find is some of the top mistakes or the things that maybe come up as you're coaching others that you're trying to help people work through in regard to the psychology of money?
Boy, money anxiety is a big one. We have a lot of money anxiety. Money scarcity. Actually, 50% of the US population, a little over 50%, has what we call a scarcity mindset, meaning that we think with money there won't be enough. And no matter how big a sand pile we create, there won't be enough. So those are
Yeah.
our two biggies. Of course, excessive debt, credit cards, things of that nature are a big one too.
Recently I had a money expert on, and we were talking about the concept of the money mindset and how do you know when it's enough? And you brought that up. You have a nest egg, whether that's $100,000 or $1,000,000, whatever that is. But I mean, how do you address the anxiety of over money that we all feel? What are a couple of things that maybe we should address or assess to help us understand? Do we have a need to feel anxious or not?
Yeah, I think, Darrin, that's a great question. And I think we all have to start getting curious. I think what I always recommend to clients is to do a money timeline. It's where did that thought come from? And why is that thought or emotion there? So a money timeline of just trying to go back and remember, what are our money memories? Happy, sad, mad. What are they? What are our painful trauma and grief memories? What was money speaking back then? And then from there, there's another exercise I like to do that's called the 3 whys. And so it's where you would take maybe your budget, your financial statements, anything that you would really say, this is my money, right? Put it in front of you, get a feelings wheel, and just kind of sit there and calm yourself. And then look at all these things, stare at them. And then ask yourself, is anxiety? Money is nerves. Money is anger. Money is, and then from there, okay, now why is that? So let's say we said, well, money is happy. Well, why is it happy? Well, because I can buy what I want. All right. And most of us would stop right there. And I always think the depth is in the third why. So you say, well, why is that important? Why can you buy what I want? Well, because I deserve nice stuff. Why do you deserve nice stuff? Because I didn't have it growing up. And then we're like, okay, there it is. Right. And so I think I would say a money timeline and the 3 why exercises is just really important in that discovery, because we got to name it to tame it. And
That's so good.
so where did this come from? What is it? How's it being activated within inside me?
Great. That reminds me too. I love how you said it's that third question. When you talk to people, you really have to tap into why you're doing what you're doing. I'm a big believer then it is the third question. So I'll give you an example, DonJay, and everyone. So what is your goal? Right? Let's say you want to make $1,500 extra dollars a month. All right, so that's your goal. Look, that's not your why. I mean, does that give you goosebumps? It doesn't me. But why is that so important to you? So that you can do what? So that you can have more money at the end of the month. Okay. Why is that so important to you? So that you can help pay the mortgage on time. Why is that so important to you? So that I never have to look across the kitchen table and see the look of fear in my wife's eyes. Suddenly, suddenly now I got goosebumps thinking about that because we're tapping into something that is much, much deeper than that. So I want you to build on that. Are we on the right track here? Because I think your guidance can really help us tap into really intrinsic things about why we're doing it or with money. And so what do you think on that?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Where's that fear coming from? Have you felt
Ooh,
something like that fear before? And so that might be, obviously, it's important to pay the mortgage, right? And we love our family and all that. But why did you get those goosebumps? Well, it reminds me of a time when we were homeless
right.
as a child. And I never want to feel that again. And I saw that same look in my mom's eyes when my dad said, we don't own this home anymore, right? Whatever it might be. And it's like, whoa, well, there's some things in your money story. We might, in that example that you just gave, there might be something deeper where we use money to control, right?
Hmm.
And we're doing it from a good place, right?
Yeah.
I don't want anything bad to happen to you, Darrin. So here, I'm going to control all the finances.
Look at that.
That's not
That's
good.
deep.
That's not
That's
good,
deep.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Well, look, to everyone listening, I think DonJay is onto something here, very much as far as psychology of money and when is enough enough. And I'll give you my own story here, DonJay, that I grew up in a small town and had a wonderful upbringing, but we didn't have a lot of money. I didn't realize we didn't have a lot of money. We didn't have a lot of money. So if you needed to buy, shoes for basketball or clothes for school or, those things, you just knew that you had to work for it. Paper route, mowing lawns, all the things that many people have done. I'm not unique on that, but I find that now I'm 58 years old. It's really not your current state, it's your upbringing that is guiding your current thoughts decades later. Okay, I'm on the right track here, aren't I?
yeah, I think you're exactly right. And I think our fears about money or how we view money, it holds us back from our true potential.
Oh, I hadn't thought about
Part of my journey was helping me give up my career to really pursue my calling. And I think a lot of us don't do that because of of a lot of reasons, but part of it is our views on money that we wind up living half a life. We don't live to our true potential, the true desire and love that's inside of us. And it's just waiting to be unleashed, and we're holding it back.
But that was your moment when you decided to I'm putting words in your mouth, but overcome the fear of money and to do something different. And yes, and what did you learn through that we can learn?
Yeah, good question. It was really for me, discovering my money story and all these things was a process for me that started way back a little bit with the widows in 1998 and then a big revelation in 2008. But cancer was part of that. Cancer was part that showed that whatever money sand pile you've got, no matter how big it is, it couldn't fix that. It
Ooh,
can't. There's things money cannot do. And no matter how big your sand pile is, money can't buy a friend like Bobby, and money can't buy a friend like Allison and Andy. And so where's our true treasure lie? Where's our true values lie? And it gets back to our, pre-internet days. We're all too busy now to really think about that and to have time to say, wow, I really value Darrin, and I'm going to send him a text today just to let him know he was on when I did my gratitude routine today, like I thought of him. Right. And so just different things like that. But yeah, cancer was definitely a part of that to just go, this is like a second life. Why wouldn't I live it the way it should be lived?
yeah, I don't know where to go from that. I mean, it sounds so trite for me to say that life here is finite, and we all have examples in our life where a friend, passes away or has a one doctor visit and their life changes forever. And then about 2 hours later, we get into our own distractions. We tend to forget that. So I think this is a really great reminder for all of us on this. So now you brought up God earlier, and what role has faith played in this journey before and now after the cancer diagnosis?
Oh yeah, that's definitely evolved. And I think for anyone, our faith should evolve. And so for me, I had a lot of childhood trauma, and I had this thought that basically God didn't care about me. And so there for a while, I grew up, with faith and church and Bible readings at home and nightly prayers. But through a series of those childhood traumas, I thought God didn't care. And so I left God, still believed in him, but just no need to pray or do anything like that. And then I came back to God, but I really regarded my faith as a business deal. Like, God, hey, I will serve you and I will do all these things. And in return, you will bless me, right? Which, for those of your listeners that know the prosperity gospel, right, it fits right in. And then it was through some other things and partly discovering my money story and then cancer, realizing like God sees me, right? God sees me. And it doesn't matter what I do, and it doesn't matter who I am and what I've, all these things, right? They don't matter. I mean, as my one friend says, God gives out love like we would flip pancakes for breakfast. He just doesn't think about it. Just like, yeah, here you go. Here's a big dosing today. So through my cancer journey, it was a lot of surrender and understanding who God really was, and trusting in him and having faith in him, and trusting, because there was thought that I wouldn't be here a year later after my diagnosis by my cancer doctors.
Whoa.
And so trusting that he would take care of my family and the other people that I love. And then it wasn't up to me to set up all these contingency plans and, all these things. Not that we don't want to prepare, but, we can take that too far. And then once I was healed, there was this like huge relief, but then there was this huge like weight that God expects something big from me. So it was reverting back to this like, hey, I did you a favor. It's a business deal, buddy. And it was so it was shedding that, right? It was shedding that thought that somehow God expects something big from me.
That's profound. It's profound. Yeah. So the name of your company is Drumbeat of Wealth. Where did the name come from? There's got to be a story on where Drumbeat of Wealth came from.
Yeah, good question. So to me, it speaks to drumbeat, which is, Henry David Thoreau said, we all march to the beat of a different drummer, and it's up to us to hear our own drum. And so I really wanted to speak to that. I think the last thing we can do in coaching is have this cookie cutter approach with our clients. And so I want to really, through the name, remember that I want to, although I have pre-planned exercises, I have hundreds of those that I can guide clients through. I want to first look at what do they uniquely need in that coaching, and for them to understand like it's okay for you to be unique. So that's where the drumbeat word comes from. And then wealth, I really wanted some people to kind of push back against that. Well, you only serve the wealthy, and there's another quote by, I think it's Sir Edward Young, that says wealth is a state of mind. So recognizing, right, that I've done several mission trips into the Dominican Republic and Kenya, and you'll see people who have a dirt floor, no windows, and no door frame with no doors, but they consider themselves wealthy, because wealth is a state of mind, and wealth is really about abundance. And so I want my clients to see that we're all wealthy, no matter whether we have 100,000 or a few commas after that.
That's good. I love that mindset on there as well. Hey, what would you say to someone who's like, okay, I get this. I really want to understand my money story. And what would just be a couple of things that you would recommend people do to take a first step to understand their money story?
Yeah, a couple first steps would be first to get a feelings wheel. And you can download those for free, a lot of PDFs on the internet from that standpoint. But take a feelings wheel. Most of us live in the emotions primarily of mad, sad, happy. But there's actually 78 emotions. So where is disappointed, right? Where is frustrated? Where is joyful? Where's ecstatic? And so really better understanding our emotions, and then just journaling about those each day. I was anxious when I went to the coffee shop with Darrin, because I wasn't sure if I'd communicated that he was going to buy the coffee or I was going to buy it, or we're going to split it. I mean, I was really anxious about that. Why is that? Wow. It's just coffee, right? And so doing some journaling there, and then creating a money timeline. And so from there, where were our happy, mad, and sad money memories from the earliest we can remember to current day? And not getting real, like when you do that money timeline, not getting real like in depth, just like bullet points. I remember buying my first toy at the store, whatever it might be. I remember my mom seeing that I was shoplifting and corrected me and made me put that candy on the counter and pay for it. All those things as a kid that we can look back and kind of chuckle about too. And so just having that money timeline, and then getting curious of, like, during that episode where mom caught me sneaking the candy bar into my pocket at the store, and she forced me, what was money saying to me? We all have a story: when we were born, when we grew up, when we first fell in love, and those all involve people and places. But there's one character that's been there since the very moment we were born and be there till we're put in the grave, and that's money. And we never give any thought to that character in our story.
It's really good. Really practical things that we can implement. Hey, DonJay, what if someone's listening and they can really relate to your story about God, and God was there, you believed in God, but didn't feel like God really cared? Through your evolution of this, what do you now know about God, and a message to those who are listening saying, yeah, I'm right there, I just don't think he cares?
Yeah, I would say start looking in those deep, dark hours of what was something that was a moment of joy, of pleasure, of gratitude. And that's really hard, right? And so if some of your listeners right now are going, yeah, right, I was there, I get that. But for me, something that really turned that around was, there was a moment in my teenage years that was really, really dark and really despair. And I have two special needs brothers. My one brother, I would basically, to hide all that grief and trauma and just squash it down. As a teenager, I stayed busy from the moment I woke up until the moment I could go to sleep, just to keep my mind off it. But there were some times where there was nothing to be busy about. And so at that point in time, I would grab my brother Mark's ball glove, and I'd grab my own, and I'd throw his into his lap. He'd always be sitting there watching something in an evening program. And I'd say, we're going to play ball. And we would go out and literally play catch for 2 hours. I mean, we'd play till it was dark. And we'd play kind of our own little game of pitcher catcher, and I think a lot of people have played this where, it was we lived in a trailer park. The lot was 40 feet by 70 or 40 feet by 100 feet. So if we swung a bat, we were going to pay for a broken window. And so we couldn't play real
narrow,
baseball.
you're right.
Yeah. And so I would start off being pitcher, and Mark would be catcher, and we'd call balls and strikes. And so you either walked batters home or you struck them out. And
nice.
And so Mark never wanted to be pitcher. He always wanted to be catcher. He always volunteered to be catcher. And for 9 straight innings, he would sit in a crouched position. And with every strike I threw, night after night, he acted like it was the first strike I ever threw in my life. I mean, he just celebrated that. And so where was God in that deep trauma? God gave you Mark, DonJay. God gave you a brother that loved you, 2 brothers that loved me like no one else possibly could, and celebrated me and supported me. And that's where God was when I thought everyone else had left me and abandoned me, including him. And so I would just say, for those people that say, I don't know if there's a God, start really looking at gratitude and saying, why would a guy do that? Like, he had his own stuff to do. He had his own life. What? Well, because of something God put in him.
Great story. Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing that. So, DonJay, you've given us a lot to think about here: psychology of money and mindset. And tell me, where should we go to follow you and everything that you have going on?
Sure. So I'm on LinkedIn, Instagram. So LinkedIn's under my name, DonJay Rice. Instagram is Drumbeat of Wealth. Facebook is Drumbeat of Wealth. And then, of course, there's my website. Those things are all linked together, but drumbeatofwealth.com.
This conversation has been fascinating. And so thank you again for coming on the show. You are I Dare You podcast listener, so you know what's coming next. At the end of every episode, I ask my guests, what is your I Dare You challenge for all of us? The one thing that we could do or try to live a better life. And I cannot wait for this. What do you think?
Boy, I would dare your audience to really look at, we all have these half truths. And so a half truth is something that it has an element of truth to it, but in essence, it's a lie, right? And so we might say rich people are greedy, right? And that's because we knew a rich person when we were young that cheated our family or whatever, right? I would say really, I would dare the audience to go and look at their half truths around money and around faith, because we have a lot of half truths about faith. And then just discover what those half truths are, name them, find evidence that shows that this is really not a truth, and then embrace a new mantra of what is true.
That is a great I Dare You challenge. Now, I have to follow up on that. I rarely do this. Give me an example of what might a half-truth about money be and what might a half-truth about faith be. Give me an example. I love this.
Sure. So half truth about money, we kind of talked about that, is rich people are evil, right? And so, right, well, when we say rich people are evil, we're actually kind of saying all rich people are evil. No,
Yeah.
not true, right? And so,
Yeah.
so from there, and like I say, that might come from my childhood or something I was told by my parents or society, my neighbors, whatever, that I've taken. And so are there rich, evil people? Sure, there are. And so what I would do is say, hey, start to, rather than have a confirmation bias that we say, hey, there's another rich evil person, right? And we're confirming what we already believe. Start to say, I'm going to start to look for rich people who are generous.
Thank you for that, DonJay. And again, it was really great having you here. It's very clear that this is a purpose for you. It came through just in living color in this interview. And so this has been a pleasure to get to know you better and to have you pour into us on financial coaching and the psychology of money. So DonJay, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you, Darrin. It's always fun.
DonJay, what if, all of us, we all have our own money story. We have friends, we have family. But what if I'm aware of, I've got a good friend who maybe is just, doing some things that I see, it's like, holy smokes, this person the behaviors are creating a lot of problems. Or maybe it's a child where I know they're in a lot of trouble. I mean, how do I engage in that conversation? And I just want to help, but how do we help them?
Yeah, wow, Darrin, thanks. That's actually a very good question. And I get that a lot. Sometimes people will email me. And so I think here we have to realize, we have to first ask, do I have what I call an admission ticket? And so, do I have that relationship with my friend that I can talk about these type of things? And so what I mean by an admission ticket is for them to be vulnerable. Vulnerability is a two-way street, right? We can't just all of a sudden whip up some vulnerability or expect them to be vulnerable, about what's inside them if we've not been vulnerable first. And the key thing there, right, is we can't vomit vulnerability. So we can't say, oh, I see that problem. Let me vomit some vulnerability here real quick, and then we'll get on to the issue, right? Vulnerability is starting to weave that into our day of life, right? Little pieces here and there. And so that gets us the admission ticket to have that tough conversation with our friend. And so when we share our heart, right, a friend is more likely to share their heart. And then getting our heart right. What's our motive? Is our motive that we truly love and want to help our friend? Or is our motive we want to fix our friend? And where's that motive coming from, right? Is that motive coming from, it's a sense of power that I think my job is to be the world's policeman and right all the wrongs? So is it truly coming out of love? And then recognizing, is my friend in pre-contemplation? They don't even see the problem. They wouldn't know what I'm talking about. Or they're in contemplation. Have they made some statements that says, wow, and we can see there, it's kind of starting to make them wonder, hey, Darrin, this is hard for me to talk about, but I care about you and I love you. And so I don't know if you've thought about, it seems like, sounds like, feels like, using those type of words, stealing those from Chris Voss. It seems like money really makes you nervous when we go out to eat. And I just wondered if you've ever thought about why that is. and then just be quiet and let them take their things. So, yeah.
It's good. Good example. Great language, by the way. Yeah, the biggest money mistakes people make decade by decade. People in their 20s, DonJay, the biggest money mistake is what?
Boy, I would say spending.
Okay. Yeah, for sure. And you get in trouble real quick on that. How about in your biggest money mistake we make is?
I would almost say workaholism or overachieving, thinking that money will bring us things.
Okay. Well, having lived through both those decades, you were two for two. I agree with that. Okay. Now it gets fun. How about 40s?
Boy. Well, I guess it would depend when our children were born, but I think 40s and 50s can be some financial enabling of our children.
Very good. I didn't expect that. That's why I'm laughing. I didn't expect that. And you mean what? I got to ask the follow-up on that. What
Yeah,
does
so financial
mean?
enabling is where, we're continuing to bail our children out. And that's something that may start small, but then grows. And I've got a post, social media post coming up on this very soon. But, basically we're thinking we're there to help, and we're doing it out of good basis love. But the child is getting the message, you can't do this on your own. And that's tough. And that's not helpful.
All right. Every parent in their car listening to this is now, their eyes are wide open right now because they've never thought of it that way. So thank you for that. How about your 50s and 60s?
Boy, I would say 50s and 60s. That's a great question. And it's wild there. I would say 50s is, I think that's money anxiety. I really do. We've grown this pile of money. We're getting ready to retire. That's a lot of change. We're giving up the career we've known. That's grief, saying goodbye to that. And now it's like, wait a minute, I no longer have a job as income. This pile of money is supposed to do all these things for me. So I would say anxiety. Yeah.
Good. Well, it's clear by your answers, you are a financial coach. You see this all the time. So thanks for that.